The sound of my key turning in the lock should have been normal. The hallway should have been quiet. My heart should not have been pounding like a war drum as I climbed those stairs, luggage still in my hand from a business trip that ended 2 days early. But nothing about that October evening was normal. I could hear laughter drifting from upstairs, soft, intimate laughter that made my stomach clench with a dread I could not yet name. It was familiar laughter. Sophie's laughter. My best friend of 12 years, the woman who helped me pick out my engagement ring, who cried harder than I did when James proposed on that beach in Santorini. What was she doing here? James had not mentioned she was coming over. I set my suitcase down at the bottom of the stairs, my heels clicking against the hardwood as I made my way up. The laughter grew louder, mixed now with hushed voices I could not quite make out. My hand trembled as I reached for the bedroom door handle. Some primal instinct screaming at me to turn around, to leave, to pretend I had never come home early. But I pushed the door open anyway. The world stopped. Time fractured into 1,000 razor-sharp pieces that cut through my chest, my lungs, my very soul. There, in the bed I shared with the man I was supposed to marry in 6 weeks, were the two people I trusted most in this world. Naked. Breathless. Guilty. Sophie's perfectly manicured hand clutched the sheet to her chest, her face flushed with something that was not embarrassment. It was panic. James just stared at me like I was an intruder in my own home. Like I was the one who had done something wrong by existing in this moment. I thought you said she would not be back until Sunday. Sophie's voice cracked as she spoke, and those words, those terrible damning words, hit me harder than seeing them together. This was not a moment of passion. This was not a mistake. This was planned. Calculated. They had discussed me. They had planned around my absence. James opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish drowning in air. No words came. What words could possibly exist for this level of betrayal? I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, drinking in every detail of this scene that would be burned into my memory forever. Sophie's red lipstick smeared across her cheek. James's wedding ring. Our wedding ring, still gleaming on his finger. The bottle of wine on the nightstand, the one I had been saving for our anniversary. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw things or demand explanations. I simply turned around and walked out, leaving them in their naked shame. Leaving behind the life I thought I knew. The drive to my sister Emma's apartment was a blur of streetlights and stop signs that barely registered through my shock. I do not remember parking or walking up to her door or even knocking, but suddenly I was collapsed on her couch, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane while she held me and let me sob until there were no tears left. "What are you going to do?" Emma asked as dawn painted her living room in soft pink light. I was still wearing yesterday's clothes, my makeup a disaster, my engagement ring heavy on my finger like a shackle. That was when it hit me. The clarity came like lightning, sudden and brilliant and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. "I am going to have that wedding," I said, my voice steady for the first time in hours. Emma stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Honey, you cannot marry him after this. You cannot." "I am not going to marry him," I interrupted, a smile spreading across my face that felt foreign and fierce. "But I am absolutely going to have that wedding." The plan crystallized in my mind with each passing hour. Every detail, every moment, every perfectly orchestrated piece of revenge that would give me back my power, and leave them with nothing but their shame. I called James that afternoon, my voice honey-sweet and deceptively calm. "The wedding is still on," I announced when he answered on the first ring. "Really?" The guilt in his voice was so thick I could practically taste it through the phone. "Are you sure? After last night, I thought." "I am sure." I cut him off. "See you at the altar, darling." The next call was to Sophie. She answered breathlessly, probably expecting James. "Hey bestie." I chirped, injecting enough false cheer into my voice to make my teeth ache. "We need to talk about final wedding preparations." "Oh," she sounded genuinely surprised. "You still want me to be maid of honor? After. I mean, are you okay?" "Of course I am okay. Why would I not be okay?" I laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "You are my best friend, Sophie. Nothing could change that." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was necessary. She needed to believe everything was forgiven, everything was normal. She needed to show up to that wedding completely unprepared for what was coming. Over the next 6 weeks, I played my part flawlessly. I sent Sophie photos of centerpieces and asked her opinion on makeup looks. I had lunch with James and discussed our honeymoon plans. I attended the rehearsal dinner with a smile so bright it could have powered the entire venue. But behind the scenes, I was orchestrating something entirely different. I had already spoken to the officiant, my cousin Marcus, who was ordained online specifically for our wedding. He knew the truth about what happened, and he was more than happy to help me turn this event into something else entirely. Something that would give me closure and show everyone exactly who James and Sophie really were. I contacted every vendor, every member of the wedding party except Sophie, every family member who mattered. I told them the truth about the betrayal and explained my plan. The response was unanimous. They were with me. They were going to help me take back my narrative and turn my pain into power. The dress was the hardest part. I had already bought it, already had it altered, already dreamed of James's face when he saw me walking down the aisle. But now it would serve a different purpose. It would be my armor, my statement, my declaration of independence. I kept up the charade perfectly. Sophie and I had our nails done together 3 days before the wedding. We giggled over champagne and talked about our future as sisters-in-law. She even had the audacity to give me advice about marriage. The key is trust, she said, examining her French manicure with satisfaction. You have to be able to trust your partner completely. I smiled and nodded, and wanted to throw my wine glass at her perfectly contoured face. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes you believe in new beginnings. I woke up in the bridal suite at the venue, surrounded by my real bridesmaids, my sister Emma, my cousin Jasmine, and my college roommate Maya. They had all been in on the plan from the beginning, and their excitement was infectious. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked as she helped me into my dress. It was stunning, ivory silk with delicate beading that caught the light like starfall. I had never felt more beautiful or more powerful. "I have never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied, and I meant every word. Sophie arrived an hour before the ceremony, bouncing into the bridal suite with her usual energy and a gift bag in her hands. "Something for the bride," she announced, pulling out a delicate silver bracelet. "I saw this and thought of you. It says Forever Friends on the inside." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I let her fasten it around my wrist, knowing it would be the last thing she ever gave me. "You look absolutely radiant," she gushed, taking photos of us together with her phone. "James is not going to know what hit him." If only she knew how right she was. 20 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, I gathered all the bridesmaids in the hallway outside the bridal suite. Sophie stood among them in her dusty rose dress, the one I had carefully selected to complement my color scheme. She looked beautiful and happy and completely oblivious to what was about to happen. "Ladies," I began, my voice clear and strong, "I need you all to line up for the processional. Emma, you will walk first, then Maya, then Jasmine." "Where do I stand?" Sophie asked, checking her lipstick in her phone camera. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper, extending it to her with a smile that probably looked more like a wolf baring its teeth. "Read this," I said simply. Sophie unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words I had written in my careful script. I watched as her face went from confusion to shock to horror in the span of seconds. The note read, "You will not be standing anywhere. Your seat is in the back row, right next to the man who lied to both of us. Enjoy the show." "Is this some kind of joke?" Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible over the string quartet warming up in the ceremony space. "Do I look like I am joking?" I asked, gesturing to my wedding dress, my perfect makeup, the bouquet in my hands that costs more than most people's rent. "But I am your maid of honor. I am your best friend. Best friends do not sleep with each other's fiancés," I replied, my voice steady as steel. "Best friends do not plan secret rendezvous while the bride is out of town. Best friends do not lie for 6 weeks while planning a wedding." Sophie's face crumpled, but I felt no pity for her. She had made her choice that night in my bedroom. Now she would live with the consequences. "Meet your replacement," I continued, nodding toward the door. Jasmine stepped forward, resplendent in a custom gown I had secretly commissioned for her. She looked like a goddess, her dark skin glowing against the deep burgundy silk, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings that had been my grandmother's. Jasmine has been my real maid of honor for weeks now, I explained to Sophie's horrified face. She knows all the cues, she has the rings. She has been to every rehearsal you thought you were attending alone with me. The other bridesmaids were watching this unfold with barely concealed satisfaction. They had never liked Sophie much, I realized now. They had been too polite to say anything, but they had seen through her fake sweetness long before I had. This is not fair, Sophie hissed, her voice taking on the whiny quality it got when she did not get her way. Neither is betrayal, I replied smoothly. Neither is sleeping with your best friend's fiancé in her own bed, while she is working to support the lifestyle you both enjoyed. Neither is lying to my face for 6 weeks while I planned a wedding that you helped destroy. Sophie looked around desperately, probably hoping for support from the other bridesmaids or venue staff, but everyone had heard the story by now. Everyone knew what she had done. The sympathy in the room was entirely for me. Please, she whispered, tears starting to streak her carefully applied makeup. We can talk about this. I can explain. There is nothing to explain. I cut her off. You made your choice. Now I am making mine. I nodded to Emma, who stepped forward with a security guard I had hired specifically for this moment. Mr. Peterson will escort you to your seat, I said sweetly. Row 15, seat 8. Right next to James, who I am sure will be thrilled to see you. As Sophie was led away, still clutching the bridesmaid bouquet she would never carry, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I had not even realized I was carrying. For 6 weeks, I had carried the burden of their betrayal, the humiliation of being deceived by the 2 people closest to me. Now finally, I was putting that burden back where it belonged, on them. The music began, and I took my place at the back of the aisle. The venue was packed, every seat filled with family and friends who had come to witness what they thought would be my wedding to James. What they were about to see instead was something far more powerful. My declaration of independence, my refusal to be a victim, my transformation from a betrayed woman into a force of nature. I began my walk down the aisle alone, my head held high, my smile radiant and genuine for the first time in weeks. The guests rose to their feet, their faces filled with love and support and anticipation. Some of them knew what was coming. My immediate family, my closest friends, the vendors who had helped me plan this elaborate revenge. Others were about to be shocked in the most spectacular way possible. James stood at the altar looking handsome in his tuxedo, his face a mask of guilt and confusion. He had been expecting his bride, but he was getting something else entirely, a reckoning. I could see Sophie in the back row, her face red with humiliation and anger, her perfect hair disheveled from crying. She was sitting next to James's groomsmen, who had been instructed to block any attempt he might make to leave before the ceremony was over. When I reached the front of the aisle, I did not take James's hand. Instead, I turned to face our guests, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone that Marcus discreetly handed me. Thank you all for being here today. I began, my voice steady and strong. I know you came expecting to witness a wedding, but what you are about to see is something even more important, the truth. A murmur ran through the crowd as people realized something was not going according to plan. James stepped toward me, his face pale, but I held up a hand to stop him. 6 weeks ago, I came home early from a business trip to find my fiancé in bed with my maid of honor. I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the venue. Not just in any bed. In our bed in our home, planning their affair around my absence. The gasp that rose from the crowd was audible and immediate. Heads turned toward the back row where Sophie sat frozen in horror, and toward James who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I could have called off this wedding, I went on, warming to my theme. I could have returned the deposits, canceled the flowers, sent everyone home. But instead I decided to give you all something much more valuable. An example of what it looks like when a woman refuses to be broken by betrayal. The applause started slowly, just a few claps from my sister and cousins, but it built quickly as more and more guests realized what they were witnessing. This was not a wedding. This was a triumph. Today is not about marriage, I declared, my voice growing stronger with each word. Today is about choosing yourself when everyone else has failed you. Today is about turning your pain into power and your heartbreak into healing. I turned to face James, who was standing there like a statue, completely frozen by the magnitude of his public humiliation. James, you had the chance to have something real with me. You chose deception instead. Sophie, you had the chance to be a true friend. You chose betrayal instead. I hope it was worth it, because this is what your choices have cost you. Not just my love and trust, but your dignity, your reputations, and your place in this community that we built together. The crowd was on their feet now, applauding and cheering like I had just given the performance of a lifetime. And in a way, I had. This was my moment, my transformation from victim to victor, broadcast live to everyone who mattered in my world. I am not devastated, I continued, pulling off my engagement ring and holding it up for everyone to see. I am liberated. I am not heartbroken. I am free. And I am not a bride today, but I am something better. I am a woman who knows her worth and refuses to settle for less than she deserves. I dropped the ring into a glass of champagne that Marcus handed me, watching it fizz and sink to the bottom like the relationship it represented. So let's celebrate, I announced, raising the glass high. Not a wedding, but a freedom party. Not the beginning of a marriage, but the end of my tolerance for people who do not deserve the love I have to give. The cheer that erupted from the crowd was deafening. People were crying, laughing, applauding, taking photos and videos that I knew would be all over social media within hours. This moment, my moment, would be remembered forever. James tried to approach me again, his mouth moving in what looked like an attempt at an apology, but my cousins blocked his path. He had had his chance to speak 6 weeks ago. He had chosen silence then. He could live with it now. Sophie had disappeared entirely, probably slipping out during my speech to avoid further humiliation. Good. She could run all the way back to whatever hole she crawled out of. The reception that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The band played, people danced, the photographer captured every moment of joy and celebration. Instead of cutting a wedding cake, I cut a freedom cake that read New Beginnings in elegant script. Instead of a first dance with my groom, I danced with my father, my brothers, my friends, all the people who had loved me unconditionally and supported me through this nightmare. The gifts were opened and immediately donated to a local women's shelter, along with a generous check from the money I would have spent on a honeymoon I no longer needed. The flowers went to the hospital where my grandmother had spent her final days. Everything that had been meant to celebrate a fake love was redirected toward real purposes that mattered. But the best part came later that week, when I posted a carefully edited video of the entire ceremony to my social media accounts. I had not been looking for viral fame, but the universe had other plans. The video exploded across every platform: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, racking up millions of views and thousands of comments from people around the world who were inspired by my story. She turned her wedding into a breakup party and we are obsessed, read one headline. This bride's revenge speech is the ultimate empowerment moment, said another. She took my fiancé, so I took the spotlight. I captioned the video, and the phrase became a rallying cry for women everywhere who had been betrayed and chose to fight back. The comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery, thanking me for showing them what strength looked like, asking for advice on how to rebuild after heartbreak. I became an accidental influencer, a symbol of resilience, a voice for anyone who had ever been underestimated or undervalued. Sophie tried to reach out multiple times, through mutual friends, through social media, even showing up at my apartment building once before security escorted her away. Her messages were always the same. Apologies mixed with excuses, claims that she never meant to hurt me, pleas for forgiveness that rang hollow after everything she had done. I never responded. There was nothing left to say to her. She had shown me exactly who she was in that moment in my bedroom, and I had chosen to believe her. The friendship we had built over 12 years was revealed to be as fake as her apologies, and I had no interest in rebuilding something that had been rotten at its foundation. James was more persistent in his attempts to contact me, but equally unsuccessful. He left voicemails that I deleted without listening to, sent emails that went straight to spam, even hired a lawyer to try to force me to divide our shared assets. But I had been smart. Everything of value was in my name alone, purchased with money I had earned from a career I had built while he coasted on charm and empty promises. The apartment we had shared became mine alone when his name came off the lease. The car we had bought together went back to the dealership when I refused to make payments on something he was driving. The life we had built turned out to be mostly my life anyway, and it was surprisingly easy to extract him from it completely. 3 months after the wedding that was not a wedding, I was living a completely different life. I had taken the job promotion that would have required relocating, something James had always opposed because it would interfere with his comfort. I moved to a new city where nobody knew my story unless I chose to tell it, where I could be anonymous or famous depending on my mood. The social media following that had grown from my viral wedding video opened doors I had never expected. Brands wanted to partner with me, talk shows wanted to interview me, book publishers wanted to hear my story. I was selective about what opportunities one accepted, choosing only those that aligned with my values and my message of empowerment and self-worth. I started a podcast called Taking Back Your Narrative, where I interviewed other women who had turned their pain into power, who had refused to be victims of circumstances they did not choose. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of downloads, heartfelt emails from listeners, speaking engagements at conferences and universities. My story had become bigger than me, but it had also become more authentically mine than anything I had ever done before. For years, I had defined myself in relation to other people, as James's fiancé, as Sophie's best friend, as someone's daughter or sister or colleague. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I was simply myself, and that self was stronger and more complete than I had ever imagined possible. 6 months after my freedom party, I was keynoting a conference on women's entrepreneurship when I spotted a familiar face in the audience. Sophie, sitting in the back row, wearing sunglasses indoors and looking like she had aged 5 years in 6 months. After my speech, she approached me at the book signing table, her hands shaking as she held out a copy of the self-help book I had written about turning betrayal into breakthrough. "Could you sign this?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the crowd noise. I looked at her for a long moment, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame, the absence of the confidence that had once defined her. This was not the woman who had laughed in my bedroom 6 months ago. This was someone who had learned that actions have consequences, that betrayal comes with a price that keeps compounding with interest. "I could," I said finally, taking the book from her hands. "But I will not." I set the book down and signed and looked directly into her eyes. "You had 12 years to learn who I really was," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "You chose to see me as someone you could deceive and discard. That woman you betrayed. She forgave too easily, trusted too quickly, made herself small to make others comfortable. I am not her anymore." Sophie's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "I have lost everything. My job, my friends, my family barely speaks to me. I just need." "You need to learn the same lesson I learned," I interrupted. "That you cannot build your happiness on someone else's destruction. That real relationships require honesty and loyalty and respect. That the choices you make define who you are, and you chose to be someone who betrays their closest friend for temporary pleasure." I stood up, gathering my things as the next person in line waited patiently. "I hope you find what you are looking for," I said to Sophie, meaning it sincerely. "But you will not find it from me. That door closed the night you opened your legs in my bed, and it will never open again." Sophie stood there sobbing as I walked away, but I did not look back. I had spent too many years looking backward, wondering what I could have done differently, how I could have been better, why I was not enough. Now I only looked forward, toward the life I was building with intention and purpose and uncompromising standards. A year after my freedom party, I was living in a penthouse apartment in a city I loved, running a business I had built from scratch, surrounded by friends who had proven their loyalty through actions rather than words. I had not dated seriously since James, not because I was afraid of love, but because I was no longer willing to settle for anything less than extraordinary. The viral video of my wedding speech had been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms. It had been turned into memes, quoted in graduation speeches, referenced in academic papers about female empowerment. I had received messages from women in every country, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery, thanking me for showing them that survival was not enough. They deserved to thrive. The book I wrote about the experience became a bestseller, not because people enjoyed reading about betrayal, but because they needed to see what healing looked like. They needed to know that it was possible to take the worst thing that had ever happened to you and transform it into the best thing you had ever done for yourself. I kept the wedding dress. It hangs in my closet now, not as a reminder of what I lost, but as a symbol of what I found. My own strength, my own voice, my own unshakable sense of worth. Sometimes I look at it and remember that October day when I chose power over victimhood, truth over comfortable lies, myself over everyone who had underestimated me. James tried to contact me on the anniversary of what would have been our wedding day. The message was long and rambling, full of regrets and what-ifs and hollow promises about the man he claimed he had become. I read it once, then deleted it without responding. He was not part of my story anymore except as the catalyst for my transformation. And catalysts are not meant to stick around for the reaction they create. Sophie had moved across the country, according to mutual friends who still occasionally updated me on her life without my asking. She was working in a job far below her qualifications, living alone, struggling with depression and anxiety that she refused to treat. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part remembered that she had made her choices with full knowledge of their consequences. I was not responsible for her healing any more than she had been responsible for mine. The life I built in the aftermath of their betrayal was not perfect, but it was authentically mine. Every relationship was chosen deliberately. Every opportunity was evaluated against my values. Every decision was made from a place of strength rather than fear or desperation, or the need to please others. I had learned that forgiveness did not require reconciliation, that healing did not require forgetting, that moving on did not mean pretending the past had not happened. I had learned that the people who truly loved you would never ask you to make yourself smaller to accommodate their comfort, and that real friends showed up not just for the celebrations, but for the reckonings. Most importantly, I had learned that betrayal was not the end of the story. It was just the end of one chapter, and the beginning of something entirely new. Something better. Something mine. The wedding that never was had become the freedom party that changed my life. The worst day had become the first day. The ending had become the beginning. And I had never been more grateful for anything in my entire life. If this story of transformation and triumph inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more tales of turning pain into power and betrayal into breakthrough. Your support helps us share stories of real women who refused to be victims and chose to be victors instead. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of survivors who became thrivers.